Welcome to the Women's Motorsports Network podcast, the show that puts the spotlight on the incredible women who fuel the world of motorsports. From drivers to crew members, engineers to fans, and everyone in between, we're here to celebrate the trailblazers, dreamers, and doers shaping the sport we love. Each episode, we share inspiring stories of females of all ages from every corner of the motorsports universe, past, present, and future. It's a journey through the seasons of life filled with heartfelt moments, laughter, and a whole lot of horsepower. So whether you're a lifelong fan, a racer yourself, or simply curious about the extraordinary women behind the wheel, settle in, relax, and enjoy a fun and uplifting ride with us. This is the Women's Motorsports Network podcast, connecting and celebrating women in motorsports, one story at a time. Let's hit the track. Hello, everyone. This is Melinda Russell with the Women's Motorsports Network podcast. And my guest today is Lara Wilde. I think, Lara, you were on the show a long time ago, or maybe I wrote a story about you in the magazine. Do you remember that?
You wrote a story about me in the magazine.
That's what it was.
Yeah,
I wrote a story about you in the magazine, but that's been quite a long time ago. And you've done a lot of things since then. So we're going to start by having you share just a little bit about yourself, where you live, your family, anything that you want to share. And then we'll get into the motorsports part. So why don't you tell us about Lara?
Lara Wilde. All right. What do you want to know? So I grew up in a remote part of rural Australia. And when I was a kid, cars were your ticket to freedom. They were your ability to get off the property and get into town and have a social life and go to sport and just, have a life in any way, which when you're a teenager is very, very important. And so I spent a lot of time trying to find cars that would take me on adventures. And through that process, I didn't have a lot of money, didn't grow up with one of those families that gave you a brand new car for Christmas. Mm-hmm. I had to go and find the old paddock beater and learn how to fix it. And then I had the most wonderful road trip adventures. I went all over Australia. I've been around Australia a few times. And I spent more than a few nights rolling a swag out in the back of the ute or beside the car and camping and having an absolute ball. We had a thing back in the day called the B&S ball, which was a bachelor and spinsters ball. It's where all the singles would come together and everyone would get their cars. And through that process, cars became very much an expression of who you were as a human. So you could look at a car and know if it was a boy's car or a girl's car, and you could tell if they came off a horse stud or cattle or cotton or sheep by what kind of paraphernalia was hanging in the car. You could tell if the person was good at taking care of their car or if they kind of flogged it about a bit. There are a lot of things you could tell about a person by their car. So I started to take great pride in my cars. And it's one of those things where even now I look at my cars and I can see every single fault and it drives me batty, and I think it'll never ever be perfect enough for me. But to anyone else, they seem perfectly okay. So I grew up in rural Australia with cars being a sign of my identity, but also my ability to go and have adventure and freedom. And I just loved cars. I've always owned them. I can't think of a time in my life where I've only ever owned one. Like I've always had half a dozen. Currently I'm at 7 cars, 7 cars and 10 motorcycles. But yeah, it's ridiculous because the thought of moving house, it's funny as a woman. Oh, well, when I go real estate shopping and the real estate agent go, oh, you'll want to see the kitchen. I think I have no idea what to do in a kitchen. Can you show me the shed? Because looking after the babies is first. But yeah, I loved cars, spent all of my formative years at car shows and different motorsport events and so on, where I got to hang out with car people. And car people are the best people, aren't they? Like it's just, well, we carry on about Ford versus Holden or Chev versus Ford or whatever it is. At the end of the day, we just all love to share cars.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
Yeah, and I started Wild Drive a long, long time ago. And the idea behind it was I had so many friends who were not brought up around cars. They maybe didn't have someone to teach them about cars. They, and I started hearing stories of like, I met this one woman who stayed in a horrible relationship because she said, I don't know how to put fuel in the car to go. I met other people who didn't take their dream job because there was no public transport in that town and they didn't know how they were going to drive to and from work. So we started seeing cars as more than just a self-expression and an adventure, but it's your ability to have a social support network and to have a healthy relationship and to have the career of your dreams and to be able to grab an opportunity when it presents. And so Wild Drive began very much so that I could share that the most basic and simple of car advice. And it was things like, yes, you should know how to change a tire, but you should also know how to tap into your local roadside assistance and be a responsible adult, pay your membership, and then call them when you need a tire changed, and if you need to get your car serviced, then that's very important. But what kind of questions do you have to ask the mechanic? You don't have to be able to do it yourself, but you need to know how to communicate. And so that's why that began.
Yeah, that's cool. And you saw a need, and then you decided you were going to do something about it, right?
Yeah, very much. Yeah, so I just started talking to people and putting it up on my website and sharing that. But what came out of it was I do like to talk a lot. And so I was doing commentary at the time for sheep and wool shows and agricultural shows like show jumping and horse events. And a friend of mine, Andrew, he said, do you want to come out? I know you like cars. Do you want to come out to the drag strip and do some commentary there? And I said, well, I really don't know that much about drag racing. He said, that's okay, because you love cars and you can string together a sentence, so you'll be fine. So he took me under his wing and took me out to my local drag racing track. And it was brilliant because I'm a little bit of an introvert, even though I talk a lot. I don't do small talk and I don't do big crowds. And so I thought, I don't know how I'm going to go at these events with so many people. But in commentary, you're pretty much in the tower by yourself or with one other person.
Right.
And so it suited me perfectly. So I started off doing drag racing commentary with him up there. And that's where I very much fell heavily into motorsport.
Mm-hmm. That's a cool story. I love that. Yes, there's a lot of people, but you don't have to be around them. And it was the perfect match, wasn't it? For you.
Very much, very much. Because while I don't want to sit down and discuss the latest TV show or, that small talk stuff. And I hate gossip of, did you hear what they did? I don't want to participate in that. But I love telling stories, and I love telling stories about people who are deeply passionate. And when you meet, like there's grandmothers there who are racing against their grandkids, and it's in their daily driver that they take to work every day. Those are my people. Love it.
Oh, yeah. The stories that you learn there have to be, I mean, at any track, there's so many stories. I was telling somebody today that I've recorded a lot of podcasts, Lara, and there's not one that's the same as the one before or the one before that. Everybody has a different story. Now, are some of them similar? Maybe, but when you really get down to it, everybody's story is different. And that's why I love doing this, because what you do and how you came to love motorsports is entirely different than anybody else.
Yeah, one of my bugbears in this industry is this whole I used to run a lot of events, and I'd run car shows, and they go, you got to have a best chicks category. And I'd think, why? My purse is exactly the same as a bloke's. I have met very, very few men in my life who have completely built a car from scratch. Right. Even, the Chip Foose of the world, they outsource stuff. Everything gets outsourced. And so it's project management. It's not about having said that, I've met some amazing women like Jasmine Green and Rachel Derbs and so on, who have completely built every aspect of a car, and hats off to them. Like, that's phenomenal. But for the most part, motorsport is one of the very, very few sports where women and men can compete on a completely equal footing.
Yes, absolutely.
At no point when you're racing a car do you think, oh, if only I had testicles right now, I'd go faster. It's never a thing about your genitals. It's always about your passion, your commitment, your wallet. Your bank account plays a big part of it.
It does,
but this is our one place to be on an equal playing field, and all we need is the opportunity to do so.
Yeah, exactly, for sure. So what are you doing right now? What is your involvement in motorsports? What's What's Lara doing every day to keep busy?
So Wild Drive's still ticking along in the back, and I'm in the process of writing a book at the moment, just with, it's your daily driver. It's a Camry. It's nothing exciting, but how do you look after it? Because for a lot of people, the car is a huge investment in their family. And it's not just about that financial investment. It's about, I want to make sure my kids are safe. I want to make sure that I don't break down on the way to or from work. It's a safety thing. It's a big part of their life. And so Wild Drive will keep doing that in the background. I'm also Deputy President of the Australian Women's Motoring Network, and that's very much focused on how do we support women, very similar to the work you do, Melinda. How do we support women in this industry? Because we don't need any special anythings, right? We can do everything the blokes do in this industry. We just need the opportunity. And I sat there for one point and I thought, this is ridiculous. Why? We don't need this, we can use the same tools. We can drive a car the same way. It's wonderful. Why do we need this group? And then I was at an event and I was doing commentary and I just felt like I was constantly patted on the head. I do the driver's briefing and someone would come up and go, you did a really good job, young lady. Like, well done. You managed to tell those drivers the briefing notes. And I think that wasn't hard. Why are you congratulating me on doing my job? Like I'm a competent person. I can do. And I was able to ring the president, Bridget Bell, and say, Bridget, can you just let me vent for a minute? And it was just good to have that support network of women who are in the industry and understood what we're going through, and just not say, oh, well, that's ridiculous, Lara, get off your high horse or anything. But yeah, you don't need to be patted on the head for doing the basics of your job, and you're perfectly capable and you've got the opportunity. So love working with the Australian Women's Motoring Network. And out of that, I have been to events all over Australia. I'm off to Perth next weekend, which is the very furthest you can get from where I live in Australia. It's the complete opposite side of the country. But that has happened through that Australian Women's Motoring Network. That opportunity has been presented, but also not just presented, but championed. I had women on that side of the country go into bat for me to get that gig. So it's been fantastic. I'm also treasurer of my local drag racing track, Spring Mount Raceway, Spring Mount Motorsport Association. So very hands-on with supporting local there. We also have a not-for-profit called Motivate Industries Mates, and working very much to connect mates through motorsport and support people with their mental health. So it's not male or female focused, but as I said, I'm an introvert and I have a habit of withdrawing, but I've seen at so many of these events, people who are by themselves and they love cars, but we don't get the impact sometimes of what just including someone can do. Now, one example is Summer Nats, one of the biggest events in Australia for cars. And I go every year. I love it. I've been going for 20 plus years. And they have a city cruise where hundreds of cars line up to cruise through our capital city. It's the equivalent of your Washington. And everyone, gets their cars ready and your car will be packed with people. And I wanted to go in. I didn't have a car down there. I was just down there doing commentary. And I wanted to go in it. And I was going around and I was saying, have you got a spare seat? People would say, oh, no, sorry, we've got, mum's here and dad's here and the kids are here, and it was packed. And I found this beautiful big black Lincoln, and I went up and said, is there any chance you got a spare seat? And he said, oh, I'm the only one in my car, you can hop in, not a problem. And I said, oh, really? That's amazing. I haven't met anyone who had a full car empty. And I said, can I bring a friend with me? He's like, oh yeah, okay, sure, that's no worries. And he was very accommodating, and he was just lovely. And I said to him, hey, to say thank you, we're all going out for dinner later. Would you like to come out with us? And he went, oh, that's, very generous. And he picked us all up in the Lincoln and we all went out to dinner and had a lovely night. And he said he's been going to Summer Nats for tens of years, decades. And no one had ever joined him for dinner before. No one had ever wanted to hop in the car with him before. He had always gone by himself, camped by himself, and it completely transformed his experience of that event that year. The following year, he brought all these other people with him who had never been before, and so they could enjoy it. But it's such a simple thing to do, to just, engage people and invite them. And so this not-for-profit industry, we've just formed a partnership with Palmyra Dragway, which is the drag strip down at Mackay, to really just make people feel included. And to bring them together. We had an event here at Spring Mount last year called Northern Nats, and it's one of the bigger car shows in the region. And normally I do commentary at it, or I've just started racing myself. But that year what we did was we teamed up with the local Ford Museum and we borrowed a limousine and we called it the Ladies Who Limo. And so I had two friends who dressed up in full pin-up era, and we just said, right, we're the Ladies Who Limo. We've got this huge limousine for the parents out there who had kids who would otherwise just sit on the hill and watch drag racing all weekend and not get to experience the track. Jump in the back of the limo, and we took them down the cruise route. So we took them down the drag strip. They came back, they did a power skid, and they got to lap around, and the kids got to hang out the sunroof and had a blast. But for a lot of those, it wasn't just mums, but it was also dads who might have competed themselves, but they never got to share that with their family. And suddenly the whole family gets to experience it. Those kids are now completely addicted. I feel like a drug dealer. I've got them hooked on the drag strip early on. But, you know, it's such a simple thing for us to do, but it was a way for us to engage people and include them. And you never know the impact that that has. So it's a passion that's very close to my heart, that we can just be nice, be kind.
And, you know, it's easy to do. It's also easy not to do. And that's the problem, is that we just don't think about that there might be somebody there by themselves, or that this is somebody that's never been here before and they don't know the way, how things work and what to do. And, you know, it's kind of like when you go to school with kids you've known forever and the new kid comes to school. You know, are you the one that reaches out to be friends with that new kid, or do you just stay with your group? And it's something that I think is lacking a little bit in our society today, teaching young people how to be inclusive with people that maybe they don't know yet. And you can just be blessed so much by the people that you meet, and you don't know it unless you get to know them. You've got to reach out.
Well, and even then, so I had been doing commentary at Spring Mount Raceway for 6-7 years. And so I had talked about every element of that track. And then, not last year, the year before, I had decided I want to take a step away from commentary, and I wanted to enjoy myself, because I felt like every time I went to motorsport, I was working. I was either writing for a magazine, I was picking up the mic and doing commentary, I was organizing some part of the event. I was always busy. And I thought, you know what, I'm just going to enjoy myself. I'm going to race. And so my daily driver, my dirty old Audi, I thought, I'll just take it down the track. I'll just have a go. The anxiety and nerves I felt, because I'd never actually been to the deep end. I'd never been down the strip. I had no idea. And so I was complete anxiety central and having a little breakdown. And the track manager at the time, Michael, he came out and said, "Why are you so cranky?" And I said, "I'm just really, really anxious." And it was lucky I had enough emotional awareness to know this is what's going on. A lot of people were just like, "Leave me alone." But I said, you know, confession time, and I don't want to seem like an idiot because I've been talking about it for 6 or 7 years, but I don't know what the other end of this track looks like. And Michael, bless his socks, said, "Well, come for a drive with me." And we hopped in one of the track cars, and he said, "Right, this is the start line. So this is what will happen. This is how the lights work." Even though I'd been talking about it on a microphone, and I've done commentary at the biggest tracks in Australia, I had never actually sat there as a racer and been through where the beams were and where the lights were. And then he drove me down the deep end. He goes, "Right, so this lane will give way to that lane. And this is what you need to know. And don't pull up to take, you know, all of that stuff." And that was so invaluable for me for a first time. And I had lunch with a girlfriend yesterday, and she said, when she first moved to far north Queensland, she went out to the track to race, and she just got overwhelmed. And unlike me, who went, "I have a friend who can teach me and I can ask," she didn't have anybody. And so it was the last time she went to the track. And so she now goes, she was part of our Ladies Who Limo, and she goes out socially, but she said, "Oh no, I don't have the nerve to be able to race." I was like, "Right, well, this season, let's get you out there and I'll walk you through it, because, you know, I've done this now." I'm very, very slow. It's, you know how people get imposter syndrome? This is my problem with motorsport, is I'm a terrible driver and ridiculously slow. So I have a new race car this season. I have an absolute blast. Miles for miles. Like, yeah.
That's what's important.
Yeah, but
so you have a new car, you said?
Yeah, this lovely guy, Darren, Northern Nats last year, he said, Lara, when are we going to see you racing? And I said, look, I raced last year. My Audi is silly slow. I just, I, and someone said to me, you know, Lara, it's not all about winning. I said, no, it's a race. That's literally all it is about. And if I'm not going to win, I don't want to do it. Like, if I'm going to be competitive, I'm going to be the best at being competitive. So yeah, Darren has a new race car, and he said, would you like my old race car? And I am absolutely blown away by his generosity, because I said to him, all right, how much do I need to budget? How much is it to serve this car regularly, and my entry fees and the fuel to get it here and the fuel in the car and tires? And he said, oh no, if you chip in some fuel money to get it here, I'll cover the rest, which won't happen. I will pay my way. But, you know, the generosity of someone to just, I don't even give people the keys to my daily driver. And here he is giving me a fantastic race car to play with. So yeah. And that's the thing about motorsport people, isn't it? Like, they love the sport so much, they want people to be involved.
Oh, absolutely. And they will do pretty much anything. If they see someone who has passion and interest, they'll do just about anything to get you going, to help you.
Yeah. I've seen people take parts off their car to give to their mate, so their mate can go on and win the competition against them. Like, it's the generosity in this industry is phenomenal, and it's one of the things I love about it. It's beautiful.
So you're going to be racing this year. Are you still going to be commentating and doing events and doing all that, or are you just going to focus on racing?
So out of 52 weekends in this year, I have 43 booked with commentary for motorsport, and then there's a couple of test and tune days and roll racing days. So that's where I'll get out there, because I'm, like I said, if I'm going to be competitive, I want to be the very best at being competitive. So fully aware of my schedule. I'm just going to get familiar with the car this year, do some test and tunes, master a trans brake. I have no idea how that works yet, but I'll figure it out. And yeah, have some fun. But also, I think when we think about racing, we think about, yes, I've got to get the trans brake, and I need to know the lights, so I got to get my reaction time, and I need to, you know, master how this car steers and so on. That's all very important. But I also need to know how many chairs to pack, and do I need an esky, and what's the best food, and do I need a marquee, and what kind of toolbox do I bring, and all of that as well. And just the logistics of going to a track for a weekend, that's important as well, I think.
Yeah, and you know, as a commentator, you take yourself and, you know, your sunglasses and your wallet, and you know, you maybe a bag, and you're set to go. When you're taking a car that may need some adjustments or something, it's a whole different situation.
Well, if you saw my level of prep just to do commentary for a day, you'll be a little mortified by the level of prep we're going to go. So just for doing commentary for a day, I always have a bag of red frogs, the little lollies, because they soothe your throat. I'll have pineapple juice poppers at room temperature. I have snacks, because while I love motorsport, my major failing with it is that all of the food on offer has not been approved by nutritionists since 1980. Like, it's all burgers and hot dogs, and if I eat that much burgers, I will have a nap. It will be the end of me. So I pack, you know, lots of snacks to keep the energy levels up, and lots of water, sunscreen and lip balm and all of those things. Just to bring your A game and keep bringing it. And I don't want to be reliant, because there's different levels of commentary. When you go to the big tracks, there's, you know, 2 commentators per bracket, and you only do 2 or 3 brackets, and you get a break in between, and it's lovely. That's the VIP of commentary. But when you do small tracks, you pick up the mic at 7 in the morning, you put it down at 10 at night, and you take it to the bathroom with you. You don't let it out of your sight, and you are on tap for the entire day. And it takes me another 3 days to recover, because I have no voice left, and my brain is completely drained.
That's what I was just going to say. It isn't even just your voice. You have to be just exhausted, because, like, you know, my husband laughs. My husband's a welder, so he uses his hands and he makes things and does whatever, right? And we'll sit down at night, and he'll be like, "Oh, I did this and this, and you know, I'm really tired." I'll sit down at night and be like, oh, I cannot even think. My brain is fried. And he's like, why? I said, because I've done 3 interviews today, and I've written 2 stories, and I've done this, and my brain is tired. It's exhausted. I just want to just like not do anything. And if you're not someone that has to really be on top of your game as far as thinking, what you're doing, and you have to get those names right and get all that, you got to pronounce it right. Like, this morning or when we first talked, I said your first name wrong. And I need to make sure I have that right. And that's what you need to do. And, every name is not easy to say. Right.
And yeah. And the thing in commentary is, like, often when you turn up to the smaller tracks in particular, you don't get an entrant list. You don't get any details about them. Mm-hmm. And the small tracks, you don't get a computer screen or anything. So I'll spend the first couple of hours of the day going through the pits. And if you look at my Facebook friends list, it's tapping out the 5,000 constantly. Uh-huh. I've met 20 of those people are my friends. The rest are competitors that I've stalked ready for a competition. Right. And and even it's down to, I have to be able to identify their car from a distance and connect that to the right driver's details. But then I have to remember their PB. I have to remember their girlfriend, their wife's name, not get that wrong. That will end your career if you get that part wrong. Did they just have a baby? Did they just get married? Did they just move house? All of those details. And mm-hmm. then it'd be funny. A week later, someone will come up to me in the supermarket, and I won't know them because I've never seen them without a helmet on. And so then they'll tell me who they are. I'll be like, oh, yeah. No, I remember you. You've got the yellow SS. And I can tell them their car and their PB and all their stats, but I had no idea who they were standing in front of me. So it's a weird world.
It is. But it seems like you really enjoyed that part of it, though. Being able to share, what's happening at the race, about the people and all that. What do you love most about being a commentator?
I think for me, I'm not I love cars, but I like the car people more. And so I had someone once say to me that they found it funny that my commentary, I sound just as excited about the grandmother in her Falcon as I do about the top fueler that's pulling ridiculous times. And it's because I am. I'm really excited about what she can do and how passionate she is about it. And the fact that her grandkids came with her for the first time this weekend, or that to me is the gold. Not, mm-hmm. And I actually had this experience. I was doing commentary for Fox Sports and KO and so on. And I was talking to these drag racers that it's all about the money. This chassis was $250,000. And, we've got 3 semi-trailers here for all our staff to sleep in this weekend. And this is my collection of Porsches. And, we just spent $40,000 to run a 6-second run. And I just thought, it's actually quite disgusting. I'm not excited about that at all. Mm-mm. But when I talked to the 18-year-old who just came out here and built his own absolute bomb, and he's having a blast. And okay, so one of my favorite moments, my favorite track out of everywhere I've been is called Spring Mount Raceway. And it's a speedway track, stock car racing. It's proper old school. They race from 10 to 3. The local Lioness ladies do the morning teas, and there's a cupcake themed every meet. These guys are absolutely brilliant, but they just started up a junior class. And it's things like a Hyundai Excel out there. And you see these kids, they're 12, 13, or thereabouts, and they're in these oversized big cowboy boots, and they've got a big helmet, they've got a big jacket, nothing fits them because they're tiny little kids. And the driver will come out of the track, and he gets out of his car, and his pit crew turns up, and they're all the same size. And it's like a miniature pit crew. And there's these 12-year-old boys and girls looking at this driver going, well, you stuffed that up, didn't you? We're going to have to fix that now. And I think that is the most beautiful moment when you see those kids and you go, they've been on the farm building that Hyundai Excel for weeks for this race meet. And then they're out here as mates, as friends doing it. And they're connecting through motorsport. And that to me is the gold. I couldn't care less about the guy with the multi-million-dollar truck and trailer and the race car and everything. That's, yeah, that's almost offensive, the way they spend money to go for less time on the track. If I can, yeah, instead play with the the kids that are out there having a great time, or the husband and wife team that are sharing a car, that's the stuff that I love to see.
Yeah, I'm 110% with you, Lara, because um, it's not about the money. I mean, I realize it costs a lot of money to race, but those kids that built that car, they will never forget that experience. Okay. That is a lifelong, they'll be talking about, remember when we did this or that, when they're 50 or so. But the guys that are, have unlimited funds, it seems like they've lost their passion if it's about the money. I
Yeah.
mean, they've gotten themselves into racing as a professional, and it seems like that they haven't got the passion for racing. It's all about having the best of this, so that I can beat everybody. And I would much rather see 10 cars that were built in the little shop behind the house competing with each other than any of those other bigger cars, more expensive.
Yeah, I was doing Summernats again, biggest car show in Australia, and they have a super cruise on the Saturday night, and so you get picked. There'll be 2,500 entrants at Summernats, and you get picked through the weekend to see if you can go on the super cruise. And as commentator, I go out and I pull certain cars in to interview the driver and learn their story. And there's some very, very cool cars going around, every type of car you can imagine. And I remember one year there was a purple Commodore, and it's an SS, and it had airbrushed, I think it was fairies or something on the bonnet. And it's not at all my style, right? Not my kind of car. And I thought, look, I'll bring the old girl in and we'll have a chat. And this grandmother gets out. There's 3 grandkids in the back seat. And this grandmother gets out, and I said, tell us a little bit about your car. And she explains that she does all the work on it herself, and she, she designed all the artwork, and she, put special seat covers in there she'd sewed and all this sort of thing. She'd also had it on the dyno that day, and it had set a new PB for her on the dyno. And so we're up to Summernats 37. She had been to every single Summernats since the first one, except for one. And I just had instant respect for this grandmother driving around with their grandkids at the biggest car show in Australia, who had been on the dyno, gone at all the driving events, and just like, it's not an SS Commodore has a cult following in Australia, but it's nothing earth-shatteringly special. We see them in the Woolworths car park all the time. Like, it's at supermarket car parks everywhere. But
Right.
yeah, it was just her passion for it, and the fact that she wasn't there for anyone else's approval. She wasn't there to impress anybody. She was just there because she loved her car and she wanted to show it off, and she wanted to share that moment with her grandchildren.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. She was making memories with her grandchildren.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, sorry, another Super Cruise story is a couple of years before that. And I love mini mokes. I just think they're the most fun you can have. They're brilliant. And there was a guy there with a green mini moke. Now, Summernats is the horsepower party of Australia. It's all about be blown to be known. It's everything supercharged and turbocharged, and it's, there's what's the biggest number on the dyno, and there are big cars there. There are massive cars there. And this guy's out there in a moke. So he stood out. He was very much not with his people. Anyway, I was having a chat to him, and his son, who at the time, Reese, was, I don't know, he would have been 9 or 10, and he's bored. He's kicking the dash. He's sitting in the seat. He's, can we go now? And his dad's like, it's his first Summernats. It was both their first Summernats. They hadn't been before, but they'd gone at all the grass driving events and all the Motorcana events and so on. And when he came around in the Super Cruise, I pulled him over and I gave him an award for one of the best cruises. Well, his son completely changed in that moment. It went from, my dad's not one of the cool guys because he hasn't got a giant blown V8, to, we got a trophy. And they went home, and his dad sent me a message and said, thank you for that. Now he wants to build his own moke. And so they have a father-son project. And I think I've seen them at Summernats for the last 5 or 6 years. And every year I see them and catch up with them. And every year this kid's grin gets bigger. and he gets prouder, and he tells me more and more about how his car's almost ready and he's almost old enough to get a driver's license. And it's just, that's the thing I love to see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And had you not taken the time to do that, he may not have ever wanted to do it. But, you know, kids don't want to be embarrassed by their parents. And if he's there and he thinks that what his dad's doing isn't cool, then, you know, he's going to be poo-pooing it. And yet you validated what his dad was doing. And now it's cool. And now he's doing it.
So that not-for-profit we started, Motivate Industries Mates, that's all it's about, is just connect people and just take the time to learn their story. And it's funny, people keep saying to me, well, what's this not-for-profit? It's going to raise money. What's the money going to spend on? Who's going to get the money? And I said, I don't know if we will raise money, because it doesn't cost money to take 5 minutes to say, hey, Melinda, tell me about your car.
Right. Right.
That's all it is. And because if anyone turns up to actually, I've got one exception to the rule, but if anyone turns up to a major car show in a car, it's because they're proud of that car.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, and I've met people who have cars that I just think, why did you spend money on that? But it has a story, like I left an abusive relationship in it, or it got me to my first job, or that's, you know, where I met my husband and so on. And so there's all those stories, and it doesn't need to be special to me.
Right. Right. And you know, it's kind of like when I go somewhere and I look at my husband and say, did they look in the mirror before they left the house? It's kind of like, but maybe that's their favorite outfit or whatever. Who knows? It's the same way with the car. It's like, wow, there's nothing special about that car until you hear the story. And then once you hear the story, the car takes on a different look, if you would.
It almost has an aura, doesn't it, then? Like it gets attached to, I get, and that's the thing for me, is so many people, cars just to get from A to B. Absolute rubbish. A car is so much more than that. And yeah, I've heard way too many stories about what a car means to someone to ever think it's just to get from A to B.
Well, and a lot of times you'll hear, I don't know how much you hear about Jay Leno. He's got a huge car collection, or Dale Jr. has all kinds of old cars out in what he calls his graveyard. And it's not because he wants a bunch of old rusty cars sitting out in what he calls the graveyard. It was a car that he did something in, or his dad did something in, or a racer that he admired when he was a kid. Oh, this was the car they won the such and such in. And if you walked out through there, you'd just think it was a bunch of rusty old cars. But every one of those cars has meaning for Dale Jr. in that instance, or whoever it might be. And we can't take that away from people. That's just too special.
I think, though, okay, so here's where I do differ from Dale Jr. is I can't let my cars sleep outside. Okay. And I have well, where I live, things rust far too easily. But you know how you have PETA, the People's Ethical Treatment of Animals? I want to start PETA for People's Ethical Treatment of Automobiles.
Oh, there you go.
I just, I don't like seeing them neglected and unloved. And we have a guy in Queensland. He has a car collection, over 120 cars, where he has one of every Australian muscle car ever built. And like, these are collector's items. So he's got one of every classic Australian muscle car, and he keeps them in a big old chook shed, and they're covered in bird poo and they're dusty. And everybody thinks, I have 120 muscle cars. That's wonderful. But I have 7, and it's just draining, because I've got to have battery chargers on, and I've got to have, like, you've got to be driving them. Otherwise you get leaks, and you've got to have, your tires date and so on. And I end up thinking, I don't really have time to drive that today, but it really needs a run. So it has to go. And if you have 120 of those, and I have said this to the guy that owns them, Jeff, that the nicest thing he could do would be to find someone who's madly passionate about that particular car, and then share it with them. Farm them out. Let them maintain it. If your thing is an LX Tirana, let the person who loves LX Tiranas take it and adopt it, and they can maintain it and drive it, and he can retain ownership. but at least that car would get to be a car. There's no, like, otherwise it's just a graveyard where I think that's sad in its own right.
Well, and they would remain pristine, because if the person taking care of it love that car, they're going to keep it inside. They're going to keep it washed and driven and clean and all that. And the value is going to be way higher than sitting out there in that bird poop area. So it would be to his advantage to do that.
Yeah, but he's just not comfortable with sharing it with that many people. It's the other thing that I have a bugbear about is people who buy a car and then don't drive it to keep the kilometers low. Like, why buy it then? You know, I see some cars are art, but they, you know, what do they say? A ship is safe in the harbor. That's not what ships are designed for.
Exactly. Yeah. Cars are designed to drive and enjoy the drive, you know, share the drive with the person that owns it out through the countryside or wherever it might be, but not to just
make some memories.
Yes.
Yeah,
absolutely. For sure.
So I have a 1976 Cadillac Coupe de Ville, and I've owned it for maybe 6 or 7 years now. And yesterday was my first drive out of the shed where we didn't have any dramas. It was like because I haven't driven her enough. And so like in the last 3 months, I've been trying to get her to the reliable stage. And every time I drive her out, we got a flat tire, but the roadside assistance didn't have the special hammer to get it off. And then the brakes seized up, and then the alternator gave out, and then a fan belt. And it was just every time it was, you know, what is your problem today, sweetheart? Like, and yesterday was our first one. And a girlfriend of mine came for a drive with me, and it was just a lovely day out. And I'm so proud of her. And I don't want to jinx it by going for another drive now, but we will.
You will. Now that it's worked well, it'll work well again, for sure.
And it's, like I bought it all those years ago because all I wanted was to be able to get in on a nice day, cruise down to the beach, have lunch on the beach, pump some tunes, cruise home. That was all she didn't have to go fast. She didn't have to look pretty. All I wanted. So now I just have to get the stereo to work and we'll be in business.
There you go. You'll get it. You'll get it for sure because you're passionate about that for sure. Well, Lara, I think go ahead.
And through that process over the last couple of years, I've met so many beautiful people, particularly in the US. So every time she has something broken, I get on the caddy forums in the US and say, lads, all right, what do I need to do here? And their advice is always simple, no fuss, no drama. It's a simple fix. And the car community.
Yeah. That's what we have in motorsports of all kinds, is a community that helps each other and doesn't expect anything in return.
No, it's really just connecting mates, isn't it?
It is. Well, Laura, I said it wrong. Lara, sorry about that. What have we not talked about that you want to make sure that we do share with my listeners?
I think we've covered it all, but just the last message, folks, is just be kind. Don't judge someone because their car is not your dream. Tell them your story. It can be just as inspirational.
Yeah.
Then do that. Doesn't cost a cent.
No, and you never know who you're going to meet and what story they're going to tell and how good of friends you could become. There's a new friend around every corner.
Yeah, and thank you to you, Melinda, for all the work that you do to connect our community, because I get a birthday card from you every year, and I'm just blown away every year by the fact that you take the time to connect people and to make them feel a part of this community. Great job.
I appreciate that so much, more than you know. I really do. And the other good thing about all of this is that you can be in Australia and I can be in Kalamazoo, Michigan, and we can be friends, and maybe we'll never meet each other in person, but we're still friends and we have common interests and we stay in touch. I keep track of you on social media. I'm sure you keep track of me on social media. And that's just the fun part of it. keeping track of our friends and saying, hey, you're doing great work over there. And I love some of the things you told me about today, the not-for-profit, and I'd like to know more about that. So I'll reach out to you in another form and try to learn some more about that. I'd like to share some of that.
Some of the most magical moments are when you've been talking to someone online for years and years, and then they either turn up at your house or you turn up at their house, and it's like you've met someone you've known forever. And you just pick up straight into that conversation. And I've got some amazing friends that I've met through, just been talking cars or talking bikes for years. And then suddenly they said, well, I happen to be in your part of the world.
Yeah. Well, if you ever come, the drag racing person that you are, US 131 Motorsports Park is in Martin, Michigan. It's a very nice track. They hold some big events. That would be probably the track where I could see you coming for something. And if you ever do, you have to make sure you reach out to me.
Well, hook me up with a gig. I'd love to come over. But by the same token, I live in paradise. If you get to far north Queensland, we've got everything you could ever want.
I may just have to do that. That's a bucket list, actually. Australia is a bucket list for me. So we'll see what we can do about that.
Brilliant.
All right. Well, Lara, thank you so much. I know you got a busy day ahead. It's morning for you as we're recording this. It's late afternoon for me. So my day is going to be over. Yours is just starting. But have a great day and the great rest of the week. And we'll stay in touch.
Thank you, Melinda.
All right. That's it for this episode of the Women's Motorsports Network podcast. We hope you've been inspired by the stories I shared today and feel more connected to the amazing community of women in motorsports. Remember, whether you're behind the wheel, in the pits, or cheering from the stands, your story matters. And together, we're driving change and celebrating every milestone. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe, leave us a review, and share it with someone who loves motorsports as much as you do. And don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Instagram for updates, behind-the-scenes content, and more incredible stories. So until next time, stay inspired, stay connected, and keep racing through life. This is the Women's Motorsports Network podcast, where every woman's story is worth celebrating.